Welcome to Left on Right, where we give the left-wing perspective on right-wing media. Today we are reacting to Charlie Kirk's video on how we have been lied to about the stock market and Trump's tariffs. In this video, Charlie Kirk describes the rationale behind Trump's tariffs. As someone on the left, I was pleasantly surprised. Charlie brings an interesting analysis with good historical perspective. Progressives agree with a lot of the things that he says about the problems facing the middle class in this country. However, Trump has done a really poor job thinking through the next steps of actually bringing manufacturing back to this country. Let's go to Charlie.
Change by every 5 minutes. I think we need to take a step back and reset the foundational framework, to reset a 30,000-foot view of exactly what's going on here. President Donald Trump has been railing against bad trade deals for the last 30 or 40 years. President Donald Trump, as a businessman, identified trade deficits. And the way trade is supposed to be constituted is we do what we do best and you do what you do best, and we will barter.
I'm not sure why he brings up the trade deficits. It's not really key to his point. The fact that the reciprocal tariffs are based on the trade deficits was one of the more incoherent components of Trump's policy. So I'm not sure why he's even making that point. So let's continue.
By doing so, you will make us wealthier, and we will trade, and we will both be able to have a flourishing future. What ended up happening in the 1990s and early 2000s, in the 1990s, there were three critical mistakes made by Bill Clinton: the entrance of China into the World Trade Organization, the NAFTA, and also the repeal of the idea of investment bank and commercial banks. That's a whole...
So basically agree with him here. The fact that NAFTA meant it was really easy for so many of the manufacturing jobs in the country to get moved to Mexico and Canada and so on. So I definitely agree with that. Also, the fact that China became part of the World Trade Organization was a big component. He goes on to talk a little bit about the some of the financial stuff. That's a little bit tangential to the actual point here. So let's continue.
Unlimited, unfettered free trade did make the 10% do very well. I am part of the 10%.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm part of the evil 10% that he describes as well.
I can say this as somebody who is part of the evil 10% of the country. When you are on the upper part of the socioeconomic ladder, specifically, if you do work that does not involve your hands, but only involves your brain, that does not involve your body, but only involves your brain, free trade is traditionally a great idea because we became...
Yeah, I basically agree with him on that point. This is also a very common progressive position that free trade benefit people in the country in terms of getting cheaper products, but some people benefit a lot more than others. People got cheaper goods, but then there's also a loss of jobs. So people who do have well-paying jobs, they're doing great because they have a lot cheaper goods. But then people struggling to get good quality jobs are just not doing very well in this country. And the fact that that's happening is one of the key contributors to why Trump is really diagnosing an important problem here. A lot of people are doing poor economically. Charlie mentions about 50% of people in this country are in debt, so that is really a important point that everybody needs to consider and think about when discussing policy. And I'll go a little bit further to say that, well, Trump's tariffs haven't been a very well thought out plan. A lot of people really feel like at least he's doing something, and the Democrats just haven't been doing enough on this front. There was the CHIPS Act, so that was really well thought out policy that's been effective. Unfortunately, Trump is cutting a bunch of that funding, and a lot of the jobs that would have come with that are potentially going to go away because Trump doesn't want Biden to get credit for that. But the CHIPS Act was good, but the Democrats need a much larger narrative and to target a wider class of manufacturers. Let's jump a little bit later into this video. I think Charlie is a really interesting video which gives some historical perspective on what is happening here.
Remedying the mistakes of past. If you had to go look at what is the original sin as to why we are in the place that we are in, there are many places, there are many decisions, but the one where we actually have it on tape, rarely do you have the original sin on tape. And it was televised on C-SPAN. And that is when we decided to make what was then a third world and maybe a second world country to have entrance into the World Trade Organization. This was a glide path. We did not do this to try and make us have greater harmony with China. In fact, you could make an argument that our relations with China were probably better before China went into the World Trade Organization. The free trade zealots told us that trade will bring us peace. In fact, it turns out that mass trade with China brought us closer and closer to conflict.
So I'm not actually so sure how true that is. I mean, I think prior to Trump, the conflict between the US and China honestly hasn't been that bad. I think the fact that people in the US are not doing so well economically obviously is bad, but the conflict between the US and China hasn't been that bad. It's been escalating just because China's becoming a rival superpower to the US, and there's a question of should the US have helped China get to that point. But on the other hand, it's been really good for people in China. The quality of life has gone up quite a bit in the past 20 or 30 years in China. So in some sense, that's not necessarily bad on the global scale. But let's get to Bill Clinton.
President Donald Trump is fixing this problem from Bill Clinton. Play cut 121.
The WTO agreement will move China in the right direction. It will advance the goals America has worked for in China for the past 3 decades. And of course, it will advance our own economic interests. Economically, this agreement is the equivalent of a one-way street. It requires China to open its markets with a fifth of the world's population, potentially the biggest markets in the world, to both our products and services in unprecedented new ways. All we do is to agree to maintain the present access which China enjoys. Chinese tariffs from telecommunications products to automobiles to agriculture will fall by half or more over just 5 years. For the first time, our companies will be able to sell and distribute products in China made by
Oof, that did not age well.
our workers here in America without being forced to relocate manufacturing to China.
Oh boy, yeah, that didn't work out so well either.
Sell through the Chinese government or transfer valuable technology for the first time. We'll be able to export products without exporting jobs.
Boy, there was so much wrong with that. I'll analyze that after the break. You look at that. There's still joint technology transfers. We are not allowed to sell our products into China. Our technology companies are not allowed to sell in the interior of China. This is one of the reasons why President Trump's approval rating is gone up. President Trump's...
So that's not really playing out, to be honest. I mean, maybe this is a little bit later than when this video was created, but if you look at Trump's polling, it is definitely going down.
daily tracker of approval rating went up last week after the application of tariffs.
So that clip from Bill Clinton was very interesting. It's definitely pretty wild how things really just did not go according to plan there. Manufacturing jobs did get exported to China. There's a lot of technology transfer to China, and people are just worse off now as far as manufacturing is concerned. So that really did not age well, but it was a pretty interesting historical moment that Charlie shared. So I thought that was a good historical analysis. Now, Charlie gives this anecdote about why a lot of people are happy with what Trump is doing.
Guy comes up to me and he says, Charlie, I'm a welder. This is the greatest week I've ever seen in politics. I said, what do you mean? He said, finally, someone is giving the middle finger to the corporate class, and they're going to defend those of us that work for a living. Us blue-collar workers have a fighter in the White House, and we've been waiting for it. Now, I'm not even saying one is right and one is wrong.
So I think this this anecdote is very insightful and interesting. And you can think about it. I think Trump's political instincts are really good. Basically, this whole situation with the really large tariffs was to engineer that political moment where somebody who feels like things aren't going very well for them feels like we've got a fighter in the White House. This guy's going to do drastic action to help us. Here's the thing, though. Trump is mainly focused on creating those political moments, and it's really not clear that he's executing well on that vision. So here's what I mean. If you think about one of the main goals here, you could say, is to bring back manufacturing jobs to the US. So, okay, you've got tariffs, but it's still not easy to get manufacturing jobs back here. There's a lot of unforced errors in his strategy. So, okay, the first one, Charlie's kind of saying China's really the main target of these tariffs. Why is Trump antagonizing everybody else in the world with these crazy large tariffs? Other countries are going to react to what the US is doing. It's very clear that the US can't be treated as a reliable trade partner anymore, and other countries are going to act accordingly. I mean, there's two reasons for that. One, Trump was elected to the White House, and two, there's a lot of people in the US who really support him. So there's something going on in the US, a departure from factual decision making, and other countries see that and understand that they need to make other alliances and cut out the US. So that was, if the US is trying to fight China, that was just one huge unforced error. China's going around now and talking to all these other countries and saying, you know, look, the US is breaking their trade deals with you, like, we'll be a much more reliable and stable partner. And once those trade deals are established, that's a huge issue for the US. So I don't really think Charlie isn't commenting on that for some reason. I don't really get it. So the next component is just thinking about, if you want to make a factory in the US, it's still hard, and the government really hasn't done much to support you. So, like, let's say you are saying we want to make more textiles in the US, and the first thing is, where do you get the people to make those textiles? Second thing is, where you get the money to invest in that factory. All those things, those policies that could support American manufacturing should be in place right now. They should have been in place a month ago. You got to build strength over time by investing in education, manufacturing, giving subsidies, doing deals to bring foreign expertise about manufacturing into the US. And then Trump just comes in with this really antagonizing, destabilizing trade move. And yeah, that guy who's a welder feels great about it, but we need to be much more strategic and precise when we act in such a drastic way in this country. I'm not sure why Charlie Kirk isn't talking about that. So let's kind of go to the rest of his commentary here on, like, how things are going.
We must be honest with this is an economic gamble. There is a risk associated with it. I think it's going to work out. I trust Stephen Miller, and I trust Susie Wiles, and I trust Scott Bessent, and I trust J.D. Vance. And of course, most importantly, I trust President Trump. But there is a risk. There is a gamble involved in all of this.
I mean, trying to say that this is a gamble, but the fact of the matter is things could have been thought through way better than what is currently happening here, and I'm not sure why Charlie Kirk is not commenting on that. All these other policies to encourage manufacturing, reducing regulations that would block it, getting more foreign investments, investing in education, we could have totally done those things and prepared ourselves. Another point that I liked, which was effective about the tariffs, is basically the tariffs give us like a little bit of breathing room to build out some manufacturing, but we need to be moving at warp speed to build out those manufacturing plants. And honestly, we could have introduced all the things that would have spurred on investment initially and then brought in the trade deals later. The thing is, people haven't had any time to actually start making factories. You can't just make a factory in a month. It takes years to build up a factory. So we really should have started this out by introducing all those carrots to get our country on the right track as far as manufacturing is concerned, and then say like in a year or two we're gonna hit you with the stick on these tariffs if you don't start taking this seriously. And I really don't know why that's not happening. I'm not sure why Charlie Kirk isn't commenting on that, but the fact that we've gone into this so recklessly just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good analysis from Charlie Kirk here, and I mean, I really hope that the economic situation gets better. Charlie's pretty confident in all of Trump's advisors, but honestly, I'm really not that confident in them. I'm not sure why they couldn't have done a better job with building out all these other policies and putting them in place and building our strength before just punishing companies without a clear plan of how we're going to actually get these manufacturing jobs back. So I hope you thought that was interesting. There's a lot of overlap in terms of what the problems are from the left and the right. Democrats really haven't spoken to a concrete plan to address manufacturing, and so that's a major problem. And just one final point is the economy and technology has changed a lot in the past 30 or 40 years. So it's really not clear that we can just return to a 1990s style manufacturing. I think a lot of people are thinking about China and saying, oh, the only reason Chinese manufacturing is good is because of cheap labor, but they've actually accumulated a lot of other advantages that we just don't have those expertise. So one example is having much better industrial automation. So that's something that the US could do really well. And if you have like a factory with a lot of robotics and engineers who manage those robots, you can get very high productive factories there where the labor is a relatively low percentage of the cost of manufacturing. That's something we could really achieve in this country, but we gotta invest in the education and the engineering and the manufacturing knowledge to make that happen. So just returning to back where we were may not be that realistic. There's also the supply chain problem. So China has really good supply chains, like say you're building a toy and you need some screws or something. You're going to be able to get those screws right away from a factory really nearby. But then the US, that's going to be hard. So that's one of those things where China has a lot of advantages in terms of their supply chain being well optimized and everything's close together. So it's not going to be so easy to just build manufacturing in our country, and we need to take all the steps, have a full court press on this problem, and make it happen. So if you thought that was interesting, I would love it if you thumbs up this video and subscribed, shared it with your friends. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.